Welcome to Brains on Games. I'm Dr. Brian McDonald, and this episode we are going to talk about another dexterity game. You know, I love dexterity games. This one was sent to me not too long ago by the folks over at The Gaming Goat, and it's a game called Flick of Faith. This is a game that you can play with kids aged 8 and up. It's for between 2 and 4 players, and games last anywhere from 15 to 40 minutes. Let's take a deeper look at Flick of Faith. Flick of Faith is a dexterity game, a flicking game that comes in this great big wide box. And the reason for this wide box is that the board for the game is actually this big, colorful neoprene mat that you can see here on the table. Inside the box, you've got plenty of space for the mat. There's a big long area here for you to roll up that mat. And then there's big spots here for the other components, the cards that come with the game. So if you do decide that you want to sleeve those cards, there's plenty of room to put them inside. There aren't a lot of cards in this box, though. Most of the space is going to be taken up by these big wooden pieces that you're going to be flicking around the mat. Like most of these flicking games, this one is light in terms of its complexity. The goal here is to have the most victory points after 4 generations of play, 4 rounds of play. Really, the way you get those victory points is by having your profits, having some presence on these different islands on the board, on the mat, or by dominating that area, having the most profits compared to the other players on one of these particular islands. You get a whole pile of bonus points too if you're able to flick one of your profits into the center circle, which is called the navel. Before you start each game, you're going to choose your player color, and what goes along with the choice of player color is the choice of the god that you're going to play. So if you choose yellow, you get a choice of Ra or Anubis, the 2 Egyptian gods that are in the game. You might also choose the Greek gods. Zeus is probably one that's going to be recognizable to most of the kids who are playing this game. And on the other side, you've got Themis. And this is the character that my son played in our first game. She's fantastic because she allows you to win ties, which is an important ability. And that's the first thing that jumped out at me about this game. So you've got these gods that each player is going to play, but each one has some certain ability, some special power that changes the way they play the game. So you've got one that can break ties. If you play as Zeus, if you place a temple on the map, you can place that temple anywhere you want on any one of these islands where you might like it to go. Ra has a great power too. This is one that I really like because the Egyptian god gets to use the Sphinx. Now, what's special about having the Sphinx as one of these pieces that you can flick around the board? Well, here's the size of the Sphinx, and here is the typical prophet that you're going to be shooting around. So these little prophets, the pieces that most of the players are going to have are quite small, but the Egyptian player gets to replace one of those small ones with this great big one that's also very heavy and thick, so you can really knock things around the board with a piece this size. In addition to those asymmetric player powers, you're also going to start each round with a council phase where you're going to vote on some special rule that's going to take place either during only that round or through until the end of the game. And those choices are based on this deck of council cards. You've got some good options here, but it does add some variability. This is a fairly thick deck, and what you're going to do is draw 2 of those cards. One goes on top and one goes underneath, and each player is going to vote thumbs up for the top one or thumbs down for the bottom one to decide which of these special rules is going to take effect. Just like I like to play with that Sphinx, which is that big heavy piece that can easily knock some other things out of the way, there is one of the council cards is a Templar card, and that allows all the players to replace 2 of their little prophets with these bigger Templars. They're not as big and thick as the Sphinx is, but they're still bigger than those little tiny prophets that I showed you earlier. So some of these council cards do only take place. There's a special rule for that particular round in which they're played. Some of them might affect scoring all the way through until the end of the game or add some ability that's in effect until the end of the game. For example, let me find a good one here. You've got the king ape, which is an extra piece that goes out in the middle of the table, and that's going to stay around until you're able to knock it right off. Sometimes it might mean that you can't score victory points on the island that's closest to your player corner, or you score extra victory points for certain islands. So there's all kinds of different rules that will take effect once these council cards are voted upon. Once you've voted on your special rules for that round, the meat of the game really is the mission phase where you're flicking your profits out across the map in order to establish them on these different islands so that you can earn some victory points during the worship phase of the game. So you can flick your pieces from anywhere along your corner. Now I've got the map here mixed up a little bit. I should be flicking more from this part over here if I'm playing as the yellow Egyptians, but you've got this little cloud, and that's where you're shooting the profits from, and they're just going to go across the board, and you're trying to establish them in different areas of the map. So now I've got a profit right over here, and if I were somehow able to get one all the way to the other end, then now I've got presence here on 2 islands. That's going to earn me some points towards the end of the game. Now this one came close to a city. If you do manage to land one of your profits so that they're touching these circles on each island, you get to place a temple. This really can mess things up for the other players. It's good for me if I place one of these because that gives me presence on that island and it counts as a profit if you're trying to dominate in that area. But it also is this great big piece that I can use to block the other player's shot. So if my prophet lands in a circle, I can take him off. I can place one of these temples. Each player has 4 temples that they can place, but if they somehow manage to run out, if they get to place all of them, I found it really hard. I think I only placed 1 in the first game that we played, but if they do place all of them and then they still manage to get a profit in a city, they can move one from one island to the other. And remember at the beginning, I mentioned Zeus can place his profit on any island, no matter which city he manages to get a profit into. So you can use these to block the shots. If I've got a player on the other side who's playing from this corner and I've got a prophet on a temple on this island, I can decide to place that anywhere, and it only will come off the board if I move it because I've run out of temples and I want to place it somewhere else, or if a player knocks it into the ocean, then it comes off at the end of the round. The end of the round is the worship phase. That's where you start to count up points. So you're going to get a point for each island where you have presence. You get extra bonus points for islands where you dominate, where you have more profits and temples than the other players do on that particular island. I should mention, though, you get a ton of bonus points even before that happens during the mission phase if I manage, and we never manage to do this. This is a hard shot to make, especially once there are other pieces on the board. And you want to really wait to make that shot until you do have pieces on the board, because if I manage to get a profit into this center circle, into the navel it's called, I get to score points during the mission phase based on where I have my other pieces. So here I've got presence and domination on 2 islands, so I would get a ton of points just by having shot this guy in here, even before we get to the end of round scoring. So it's a dexterity game with flicking, but you're also trying to do some area control. You're trying to dominate on a particular island and block the other player's shots from being able to knock your figures out of that space. And it is hard to knock one of these temples around. Look how much bigger it is than these little tiny guys that you can see here on the map. So you really would have to hit it pretty hard to avoid, to knock it out of the way without knocking your own person off the board as well. What skills are you practicing when you play a game of Flick of Faith? Well, first of all, it's a flicking game, and so we are talking about motor dexterity. You are really trying hard to gauge what's the force that you need in order to knock these pieces around to the location where you want them to get to. And it takes some practice because, the pieces are different sizes and there's some friction here on the map, but not too much. So you can't hit it too easy. You don't want to hit it too hard because you'll overshoot your target. This is a really good surface to play on, and I certainly like it better than a board that would have been folded because you'd have creases in the middle that would cause some problems. So playing on a neoprene mat with these kinds of pieces is really great. You've also got the spatial skills that you're exercising just a little bit, such as when you're placing these temples to block the other player's shot. You want to think about, well, where Where am I trying to make sure that I have presence? Where do I want to stop the other players from taking a shot? How can I block them most effectively in order to ensure that they can't disrupt whatever my plan is for that particular round? Final thoughts about Flick of Faith. Well, first of all, I'm really happy that the folks over at the Gaming Goat sent this game my way, because I've done lots of previews lately on the channel, but I haven't talked too much about games that are already out there and available that you can order. And this is one that exists in the world that you can already pick up. But it's a beautiful game with this beautiful, colorful mat. You've got all of these great chunky wooden pieces with little temples or prophets drawn on them. The artwork on the cards is really good. You couldn't really see very much from what I was holding up, but it's almost like a sketching kind of a cartoony style. And some of the cards are sort of funny. They have some puns on them. You might get to toss a tornado onto the board. I didn't even mention that. We have some of these little counters in the game, or big cardboard pieces that can disrupt a player's turn. And so it's got a sense of humor. It's got good artwork, and it looks really good. The fact that you're playing with variable powers is also something that not every single dexterity game includes that. So you do get to break the rules a little bit, or have some extra rule or ability that you can choose at the start of the game. Plus, you've got the council cards that add some variation and replayability, I think, because every single game that you play is going to be different. You're only playing 4 rounds. You're only activating one of those powers per round. So it really does change things up quite a bit. The strategic placement of the temples is fantastic too. This is really a great addition to a dexterity game, because I'm not flicking these onto the board. I am choosing where to place them. So there's no dexterity involved in this part. You've got to hit that shot, get it right into that circle of the city. But then I'm moving that piece anywhere on the island, which I think is really, it does add a little bit of strategy, but it's nothing too complicated for the younger kids. And dexterity games are great because it's just for that reason. You can play these things with kids of almost any age, or adults, and they're always good for a laugh. They're certainly more entertaining even to watch than when you're watching someone play a strategy game and they're thinking about their moves. Every so often there might be, I think I'd rather watch a highlight reel of a strategy game, but I could sit and watch people flick pieces around a board. Well, honestly, I'd probably rather play the game, but I do enjoy watching people. There's always some crazy thing that happens in these dexterity games. So they're really fantastic. And then you've got the theme, the mythology theme. And it is one where, maybe especially now you've got Egyptian gods and Moon Knight is on television, maybe there's some curiosity about some of these characters that are on the god cards that you're choosing at the beginning. And even the drawings of I like the Egyptian one in particular. I keep holding this one up because I think it's my favorite. I just, it's not a jackal head. It looks kind of like a dog when you're looking at Anubis here. You've got, the artwork is great, and it's just kind of funny. And I had a really good time playing this game. And I hope that kids maybe will become curious about some of those, like, who are those? What's Zeus all about? Is that Greek or Roman? And then you're encouraging some research about history. If there's a downside, there's really not much of a downside to this game. Well, I would say it is a game that you don't play just immediately when you pull it out of the box, because you may be able to tell all of these little wooden pieces have stickers on them. And I spent some time putting stickers on all of these pieces before I could play the game. So, for some folks, that's a toughie. It took me a while and some practice before I got used to and comfortable with putting stickers on pieces on my board game components. So I was a little more comfortable doing this one. If you look at my copy of Istanbul, I messed that one up a little bit. I'll be honest with you. For some folks, stickers might be a deal breaker. The pieces are different sizes, so you can kind of tell, but I think they're much more recognizable with the stickers on. The other thing is that to hold the mat, the box is a really weird size. So it's not a box that's going to fit on the shelves behind me. I'm going to have to put it up on top. It might sit in front of one of my other big games like Fortune and Glory, or I might have to move a big AT-AT that's up there on the shelf that you can't really see. So it's not an easy game to shelve and put away. It is easier to do than Crokinole because the pieces do roll up. It's not a great big 28-inch board that you have to roll around somewhere. but it is larger than lots of other games. It's got that wide rectangular shape. So, I mean, those things are hardly a knock on this game. We had a lot of fun playing it, and I have to thank the folks at the Gaming Goat for sending Flick of Faith my way. If you have any comments, you can leave them in the comments section below the video, or you can email me at brian@brainsongames.ca. Brainsongames.ca is the website. That's where future episodes will go, and the previous ones are up there already. Brains on Games is the Twitter handle and the Facebook page and the Instagram feed, so we're all over the place. And if you enjoyed this video and you want to be notified of future ones, you can head on over to YouTube and click that subscribe button. Thanks for joining me, and hopefully I'll see you next time.